الحمد لله وحده الصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ واعدنا موسى 40 ليلة ثم اتخذتم العجل من بعده وأنتم ظالمون صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and recall when we made an appointment with Musa for 40 nights, ثم اتخذتم العجل من بعده, and then you took for worship the calf after him, وأنتم ظالمون, and you were zalim, and you were the wrongdoers. We have discussed in the verses prior to this. This is verse number 51 of Surah Al-Baqarah. We have discussed prior to this verse the favors Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conveyed upon Banu Israel. This is another favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conveyed upon Banu Israel. But then along with that, Allah ta'ala mentions how because of their one mistake, which was a very, very grave error, grave mistake, how Allah ta'ala destroyed a bigger portion of Banu Israel. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this in this verse, but there is a greater lesson to learn for this ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah says, وَإِذْ وَاعَدْنَا مُوسَى 40 لَيْلَةً. We discussed last time how Banu Israel witnessed the bounties of Allah, the blessings of Allah before their own eyes. They realized the drowning of the enemy whilst they were looking on. And that in itself is a great blessing of Allah Ta'ala, that a person sees the destruction of the enemy before their own eyes. So Allah says, وَأَنْتُمْ تَنْظُرُونَ. Allah Ta'ala not only destroyed your enemy, but He destroyed your enemy whilst you were onlooking, whilst you were looking. The scholars have mentioned a very interesting point. Banu Israel was so scared of Fir'aun, they were not accepting the fact that Fir'aun has died. So they asked Musa alayhi salatu wasalam that we want to see that Fir'aun has been destroyed. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam made dua. Allah Ta'ala ordered the ocean, the sea, to cast the body of Fir'aun outside. It was cast outside. Some scholars have mentioned that a piece of the nose of Fir'aun was cut whilst he was in the ocean. Wallahu alam, usko naak ki bahut fikr thi, usko takabbur bahut tha, he had a lot of pride. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took a portion of his nose away through one of the fishes of the sea. But anyway, he was brought to the shore. Now, the story that we find here is when Banu Israel get onto the other side of the Red Sea, on the other side of the river Nile, after a while, this is not straight away, this is after a while, Banu Israel say to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, "O Musa, if we can have a book of law, if we can have a message which will govern our lives, and we can follow this paygam and the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a book form." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning the same story in this verse here. Okay, when Banu Israel asked Musa alayhi salam, they wanted a book of law, they wanted the Tawrat. Allah Ta'ala promised Musa alayhi salam he will have to go for i'tikaf. He will have to go for i'tikaf. Now what is interesting here, Allah Ta'ala says, وَإِذْ وَاعَدْنَا مُوسَى 40. Remember and recall the time when we made an appointment with Musa for 40 nights. The first thing we learn here is the maqam and the position of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why? Allama Hifzul Rahman Siyuharwi rahmatullahi alayhi in Qasas al-Quran, in volume number 1, around page number 285 somewhere, he mentions how many times Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is mentioned in the Quran with name. Musa, Musa, Musa. Allah Ta'ala mentions him 107 times in the Quran, in approximately 28 paras of the Quran. But everywhere Allah Ta'ala takes the name of Musa. How many places have you heard in the Quran Allah Ta'ala taking the name of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam? Then likewise many other Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Nowhere in the entire Quran has Allah Ta'ala addressed Rasulullah directly with his name. This is a token of respect. Yes, the name Muhammad has been mentioned in the Quran 4 times. But nowhere is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is directly addressed by Allah with the word Muhammad. Yes, Allah says Muhammadur Rasulullah in Surah Al-Hujurat. Muhammadur Rasulullah in Surah Surah Al-Fath. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. Jazakumullah. So in Surah Al-Fath, right towards the end, Allah says Muhammadun Rasulullah. But not directly, he is not addressed. This is respect and a token of respect to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The word Musa, وَإِذْ وَاعَدَنَا Musa, originally this is from the Hebrew language. It's from the word Misha. But when it comes into the Arabic language, it becomes Musa. The word Misha, the word Mi means water, ma'un. And the word Shah means tree, darakh, lakri. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was found in between the water and a sanduk that his mother had prepared for him. When the daughter of Fir'aun takes the child from the water, she says Misha. Basically a child that we have found in the water, in amongst some wood. This is why he was called Misha. But thereafter, when it becomes transformed into the Arabic language, it's become Musa. So وَإِذْ وَاعَدَنَا Musa. As I mentioned, he's mentioned approximately 107 times in the entire Quran. Allah Ta'ala says, إِذْ وَاعَدَنَا مُوسَى 40 لَيْلَةً. In another verse of the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, وَوَاعَدَنَا مُوسَى 30, where Allah Ta'ala has mentioned in regards 30 days. Initially, when Musa alayhi salatu wasalam left his community, he gave them a promise he will be back within 30 days. Here Allah Ta'ala mentions 40 days. Why? Hafiz ibn Kathir rahmatullahi in Tafsir ibn Kathir in volume number 1, in the commentary of this verse, he writes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called Musa alayhi salatu wasalam on the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah. On the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah, Musa alayhi salam was brought for i'tikaf. Okay, he will have to go in i'tikaf. At the end of the i'tikaf, Allah Ta'ala will give him the book of law. The Tawrat will be given at the end of the i'tikaf. He goes on the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah. 30 days he had promised to his community. But in the meantime, after 30 days, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam broke his fast. Without the permission of Allah. Because, Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam will do everything with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On one occasion, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam became ill. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, I am not well." Allah ta'ala says to Musa alayhi salam, "Oh Musa, you have from these herbs." So Musa alayhi salam ne kha liya. He had these herbs and Musa alayhi salam gained shifa. He was healthy. Next time he had the same complaint without asking Allah, Musa alayhi salam uses the herbs and he was not cured. He said, "Oh Allah, I don't understand. The first time I had the herbs and I was cured. The second time I had the same herbs, it was the same trouble that I had, but I was not cured." Musa alayhi salam was told, "Oh Musa, when my decree was there, you was cured. When my decree was not there, my order was not there, you was not cured." So it happens with the will of Allah. Musa alayhi salam was told to do i'tikaf for 30 days with continuous fasting without iftar in between. After 30 days, he did iftar himself. Some scholars are of the opinion he did iftar with miswak. And basically he did miswak and he did iftar. But Allah, because it was without the will of Allah, without the order of Allah, Allah Ta'ala, and that was obviously the test for Banu Israel, Allah Ta'ala increased his 30 days by another 10 days. Hence the i'tikaf became 40 days. So from the 1st of Dhul Qa'dah until the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, they were the 40 days of his i'tikaf. At the termination of the i'tikaf, Allah Ta'ala grants him the Tawrat. But what happens in the meantime? Samri realizes Samri is an individual regards whom one day someone asked Malakul Maut, someone asked the angel of death, have you ever grieved taking out the soul of any individual? It was your duty to take out the soul. Like Allah Ta'ala, when He gave the duties of taking out the soul, okay, to whom that duty will be given? Will it be given to Jibreel, Mikael, Israfil, Israel? Who will it be given to? Allah Ta'ala sent every one of them for a specific duty. Allah Ta'ala sent Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam to bring matti and soil from different parts of the world. This has been mentioned by Hafiz ibn Kathir rahmatullah somewhere in Ibn Kathir. So he was told to take out soil from different parts of the world for the creation of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam goes, and the earth speaks to Jibreel and says, "Oh Jibreel, please don't separate me from my brothers, any other parts of the soil. Don't separate me." Jibreel alayhi salam comes back and says, "Oh Allah, Zameen ne mujhe tumhara wasta diya. He gave me your name, and it said, for the sake of Allah, please don't separate me, so I have come back." The same happens with Mikael, same happens with Israfil. Now Israel alayhi salatu wasalam goes and he says, I have been ordered by Allah, I have to bring the soil, whatever happens, whatever you say, I will bring it back. He brings the soil back. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the duty. Why? Because you'll have mercy for none. You will have mercy for no one. And on the occasion, there was one occasion when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam met Malakul Maut. Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Oh Muhammad, if Malakul Maut had smiled for anyone, it would have been you." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has just taken out that mercy from. So someone asked Malakul Maut, "Have you ever felt grieved when you took out the soul of any individual?" He said, I was grieved when I took out the soul of one individual, one child in Banu Israel who was cast into a cave by his mother. He was left in a cave by his mother, absolutely alone from the oppression of Fir'aun. The mother felt, I'd rather leave my child in the cave. Maybe someone will get hold of it and look after the child, because if I leave it in the community, okay, Fir'aun and the forces of Fir'aun will kill my child. So I left my child there. I left the child, the lady left the child there, and you know what happened? Allah Ta'ala nurtured that child through Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. When Allah Ta'ala told me to take out the soul of the mother of that child, that is the time when I grieved. You know, this child is alone, he's in the cave, there's no one to look after him. Okay, and Allah Ta'ala is telling me to take out the soul of the mother. When Sha'ir says, "Musa alladhi rabbahu Jibreel kafiru, wa Musa alladhi rabbahu Fir'aun mursalu." Because the name of Samri is also Musa. Uska naam bhi Musa tha. It says that Musa who was nurtured by Fir'aun became a kafir. Yani Samri. And that Musa that was nurtured by Fir'aun became a Rasul of the time. So it says, وَإِذْ وَعَدْنَا Musa. When we promised to Musa, 40 layla. And now Musa alayhi salam has been given the Torah. Now you know, this is a very interesting, Allah Ta'ala mentions here 40 nights. MashaAllah, we have the brothers that take individuals out in Jama'ah for 40 days, and they say, you know, you must go out for 40 days. The time of 40 days has a great impact in the changing of a human being. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, a person who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will come a time for 40 days continuously, there will come a time where Allah ta'ala will bring about hikmah on the tongue of that individual from his heart. We find in the hadith mentioned by Shah Abdul Aziz Muhaddis Dehelvi rahmatullahi in Fath al-Aziz. He says, خُمِّرَ تِينُ آدَمْ 40 صَبَاحًا. The teen and the matti and the clay and the soil of Adam alayhi salam, when it was gathered from different areas of the world, it was kept in the form of matti and soil and clay for 40 days, and thereafter it was transformed. If you look at the phases of human embryology that are mentioned in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the nutfa of a child remains there for 40 days. Thereafter, the next phase of alaqa, mudgha, again there 40 days, 40 days, 40 days. Why? Because that it has a great impact in the transformation of a human being and the changing of a human being. In the time of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, men and women used to come into the masjid. One young individual fell for a young girl in Masjid Nabawi. He saw her in Masjid Nabawi and he fell for her. and he approached her and he said, I want access to you. The lady, young lady, was a very, very pious lady. She said, I'll give you access to myself on one condition. And that one condition is, you have to read Salah for 40 days in Masjid al-Nabawi behind Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab with the Takbir Ula. After those 40 days, if you can fulfill that condition, I will give you access to myself. The individual says, that's fine, no problem. He starts it, and obviously day by day, his situation changes. After 40 days, the lady, the girl, the young girl, sends the paygam, sends the message. Okay, now you fulfill your promise, now you have access. The youngster says, I've met what I really want. मुझे मिल गया, जिसके लिए मैं निकला था वो मुझे मिल गया. Meaning, I've reached Allah. After 40 days, I've reached Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've gained the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reading Salah in the Masjid with Takbir Ula behind Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. After that, this incident was related to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. Sayyidina Umar said, صدق الله سبحانه وتعالى حيث قال إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر. How true Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Salah will prevent from al-fahsha wal-munkar. Evil, munkar, fahsha, bihayai. So وَإِذْ وَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 40 لَيْلَةً. After 40 days, Musa alayhi salam comes back with the Torah. Now in the meantime, somebody had made and carved a calf. Somebody by nature was a goldsmith. And he was a very, very intellectual individual. What he had seen something no one else had seen. He had seen the animal or the horse on which Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam was traveling. Wherever it set foot, it was growing vegetation there. It's growing greenery, and it's got the sense of life. So he took that soil from underneath the footsteps of the animal of Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, and he preserved it with him. उसने वो मट्टी अपने पास रख ली. Then came the time when Musa alayhi salam went and is not back within 30 days. Now look what he says. He takes all the sona and the gold that was accumulated from the women of Banu Israel, that gold that they had borrowed from the women of Egypt when they were leaving, with the intention of going to their festival. Okay, they had borrowed some gold, so he had accumulated all that gold. He melted the gold, molten gold. He carved out a calf. And in that calf, he puts and he throws the soil taken from under the footsteps of Jibraeel's Sawari and mount. Puts it inside. Allah says in the Quran, فَأَخْرَجَ لَهُمْ عِجْلًا جَسَدًا لَهُ خُوَارٌ. He takes out for them a calf that has a structure, that has a voice. It's a very, very nice calf that he carved out, and thereafter a very alluring voice as well coming out from the animal. And then he says, somebody says, هَذَا إِلَهُكُمْ وَإِلَهُ مُوسَى فَنَسِيَ. This is your Lord. This calf is your Lord. وَإِلَهُ مُوسَى. And the Ilah and the deity and the Lord of Musa. But unfortunately Musa forgot. He went in search of his Lord, but his Lord is here. 90,000 people from 670,000 got themselves involved in idolatry. This is the lesson that we learn from here. Allah Ta'ala gave everything to Banu Israel. Everything. They stayed in the company of a Nabi. They witnessed the mu'jizat of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. But look how easy it is for shaitan to divert an individual into kufr and into shirk. If a person is not careful, it is so easy. Luqman Hakim, rahimahullah, he gave his son approximately up to 10,000 advices have been mentioned of Luqman Hakim to his son. 10,000. Approximately 4,000 have been documented. Sahib Kamalain in the commentary of Jalalain has mentioned in one place in the Surah Al-Luqman 85 in one place. And they are beautiful advices. And he says the first advice Luqman gave to his son, "Oh my son, recognize Allah." Mere pyare bete, recognize who Allah is. You ask our children today to speak about Allah, you believe me, they can't speak for 5 minutes. Why? Because we have never educated them. Remember, it is very, very easy for an individual to go into shirk. And in order to avoid that, the thing what we need to do is constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, another thing we can learn from here as well, the evil impacts of evil friendship. These people have stayed for a few days in the company of somebody, and look what has happened to them. Look what has happened to them. They have been involved in idolatry within a few days. So this is the impact that we have of bad friendship and how shaitan is working all the time. I like it, these people have seen everything before their own eyes. But how and so easily a person can go into shirk. Sometimes we don't even realize and we are going into shirk. Sometimes we don't even realize. If you remember, I think last week or the week before that I mentioned one saint was crying, and he was crying a lot, and someone said to you, why are you crying so much? After a while he realized, when he was thinking within himself, okay, you know, I lost one son. Why did I cry so much? Allah Ta'ala put it into his mind, and he said to himself, you know why? Because I was thinking, this child, when he will grow up, this will become a means of my support when he will grow up. When I can't work anymore, this child will work, he will support me financially, and this child will make me independent. He says, now I've lost my support, so therefore he is crying. He realizes, Alhamdulillah, after that he says, Alhamdulillah. Yani Allah ne bete ko utha liya, Allah ka bahut bada ihsan hua, Allah saved me from shirk. Allah Ta'ala has saved me from shirk because I was thinking it will be this child that will support me when I will grow up, and not Allah. So although the mind is diverted for a moment, and then this is why he says, Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala saved me from shirk. You know, we don't even realize it, and we are in matters of shirk. Sometimes we eat some food, fast food. In the morning we have a stomach upset, and they say it was because of the food that I had from the takeaway. You know, this is also, how can food give you food poisoning? Maybe you can say Allah Ta'ala made it into a means, but you have to, the forefront of your mind must be it was from Allah. So from this lesson we learn how easy it is if a person is not careful to go into the depth of shirk and kufr. Halakha, they were living in the midst of Anbiya alayhi salam. But now the question that arises here, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam made his deputy, his brother Harun. Did Harun not do anything? Why, despite the presence of Harun, why were these people so easily influenced by somebody and involved in kufr and shirk? Why so easy? The scholars have mentioned because for so many years of their life in Egypt, what have they seen? They have seen a community that was only worshipping. This is mentioned by Allama Hifzul Rahman Sisi-Yuharbi rahmatullahi in Qasas al-Quran. He says the reason why, because Banu Israel have just seen for so many years, hundreds of years, the Misri people used to worship snakes. They used to worship snakes. They used to worship the cow. They used to believe there were some people from amongst the Misriyin, the people of Egypt, that had a aqidah called Aqidatul Hulul. Aqidatul Hulul means when you believe, Allah, like the Hindus have the aqidah of Awtar, where they believe Allah Ta'ala has come into the world in the form of the calf. Like we have some amongst the Shias who believe Allah Ta'ala has come into the world in the form of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And hence they believe Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay, you find many books. Many books. You have the name Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Because a lot of the printing presses in Beirut are controlled by Shias. A lot. Fatima, they'll have, after the name of Fatima radiyallahu anha, they'll have Fatima alayhi salatu wassalam. So anyway, this is a great eye-opener for us. We have to remember if we have not made an effort on our children, it is very easily for them to go into kufr and into shirk, and especially in the countries where we are living. Last year when I was in America, in Dallas, in Texas, speaking to some university students, they were saying, okay, brother, you will be shocked if you go to universities here. In one university in Dallas, 75% of Muslim brothers say we don't believe in Allah. 75% of Muslim students in one university, they say, they say we are atheists. There are so many people. Now, if we don't educate our children, and this is what Allah Ta'ala, this is the lesson we can learn from this verse. Okay, these people were amongst the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam. And look how easily, if we don't look after ourselves. Allah Ta'ala so beautifully mentions what is the first line of defense between us and between shaitan. The first line of defense is dhikrullah. What shaitan will do, وَيَسُدَّكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَعَنِ الصَّلَاةِ. Shaitan will prevent you from the remembrance of Allah and from salah. If he is able to penetrate this first line of defense, then for shaitan to attack us is very, very easy. The moment we go away from salah, Shah Abdul Aziz Muhaddis Dehlwi Rahmatullah says, the moment you turn away from salah, it's very, very easily for you to go into a domino effect when neglecting haram will lead to going towards haram. Irtikabul maharim. Then thereafter you will go into haram. Once you start leaving fara'iz, then you will go into haram. So the first line of protection for ourselves is constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why we should educate our children at least 100 times on a daily basis. They should take the name of Allah, be it in the form of the third kalima, okay, whereby it gives them a reminder, gives them closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ahadith as well, where Rasulullah says, teach your children, علموا أولادكم محبة الله ومحبة الرسول ومحبة القرآن. Teach your children the love of Allah, the love of Rasulullah, and the love of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding. Right at the end of the verse, Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَنْتُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. You are wrongdoers. Because this is true zulm, that a person is partnering anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the hadith mentioned by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud or Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala in Mishkat, where Rasulullah was asked, what are akbarul kabair? What are the biggest of sins? There Rasulullah said, أَن تَدْعُوَ لِلَّهِ نِدًّا وَهُوَ خَلَقَكَ. Okay, you attribute a partner to Allah whilst Allah Ta'ala is your creator. Allah created you, Allah gave you everything. How can you partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the realization that we constantly remember Allah Ta'ala. We educate our children that they must remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Give our children the knowledge of aqidah, because this is the basis of preserving their iman, inshallah. Then the Sahaba used to say, تعلمنا الإيمان ثم تعلمنا القرآن. We learn iman first, then we learn the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the realization that we understand who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly is, and that we avoid all forms of shirk, inshallah. Allama ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi in his kitab Madarij al-Salikin has mentioned there are two types of shirk. Maybe we are not involved yet in the higher category of shirk, which is partnering with Allah, but he says a lot of the people of this ummah are involved in the lower category of shirk, where we are doing actions for show, which is called ar-riya wa sum'ah, actions that are done for fame. This is also a type of shirk as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevent us all, Allah Ta'ala safeguard us all, inshallah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us firm belief in the being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the ability to recognize who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who our creator is. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.